Tonight's episode is a podcast edition, so this is not your average green screen, cheap $2 effects. So it's just me sitting behind a camera, live stream with the man, the myth, legend, the man right there, SMT, Sam, the Sneed Mobile Tech. Welcome back, man. It's always great to have you on.
Good to be back, man. Thanks, bro.
And also, everybody, stop adding me with the sweaters. That's just the way I like it. This one rings. So it's Christmas. It's Christmas. Well, anyway, so tonight's episode, we're only going to be focusing on one story and one story alone, RCS messaging. I made this specifically because of two reasons. One, not many people know about RCS, so it's time to wake some people up. And number two, we've actually talked about this in the past, and it's funny how these things tie in. So we'll discuss that as we go along. But I want to bring you guys to what is RCS. I want to introduce you guys to exactly what it is, what it does, the benefits, who it's for, etc. So we're going to go into detail about this. We're not going to stop till pretty much we can't talk no more about RCS. So my message to you, Sam, pack a lunch. It's going to be long.
There we go.
But before we do have one quick story to get out of the way. Obviously, I don't like to do this, but it's okay because, oh, that's the wrong article again. But that's the article you guys will be reading, will be working off of. That is the most recent article anyway. It's 2019 that describes the backstory, everything about RCS. But before we continue, let's talk about something real quick, real fast. Android 10 rolling out to the Galaxy S10, Note 10, etc. So Samsung has had a track record for not really updating things as fast as you would normally see with like OnePlus or even the Google Pixel lineup. Well, ever since Android 10 has become a little more easier for companies to optimize and use, since Google's making a little more open source, a little easier, Samsung has actually been ahead of their release for the United States. They've been rolling it out in Europe. They've been rolling it out all over the country. And now they're finally hitting the United States. And right now, Verizon and AT&T have the update. This is just a random article for the S10, but it does note at the bottom these other things. So I want to talk to you, Sam. How does this feel knowing that Samsung is actually ahead of their release schedule? Can this be a common thing? Is this going to be something that Samsung will be doing more? And also, how do you feel now that Samsung is pretty much kind of getting rid of that name of updating and delaying updates?
The thing about the Galaxy line, when you look at their pedigree of updates, they're really good about security patches and monthly security updates. When it comes to operating system updates, they've got that reputation of being a little slower. And then the second part of that is they've always kind of left it up to carriers, like because they've got different carrier models. So the Verizon model, the T-Mobile model, and then as well as like, Sprint, whatever. Each carrier was pushing the updates at a different rate. So you've got like lots of obstacles that get in the way. Currently, I think what Samsung is doing is they've kind of mainstream their models a little bit. They're making less of them. That helps a little bit. And then trying to do more from their end to reduce, all, like the different ways that you have to get clearance for the updates. It's helped a little bit. I still don't see them ever reaching OnePlus type of status when it comes to updating phones and obviously, Pixel devices. But it's good to see this happening. But we can't expect it like, these are newer phones, right? These are Galaxy devices that are less than a year old, and they deserve timely updates because you've just paid at least $1,000 for a phone, right?
Absolutely, I agree with that. And also quickly, just want to say hi to Cash Gamers. How you doing, man? Good to have you on tonight. Go ahead, continue.
So I'm saying, like, you're deserving of updates. You've just purchased this device for $1,000 or better. They should be coming pretty quick, and users appreciate that. You don't want to be sitting back with Android 9 and you paid $1,000 for your phone 3 months ago and the update's been out for 2 months. You're like, well, everybody else is starting to get it. Where's mine? So I'm happy to see that it's coming. I still feel like they're always going to treat those that are like one generation behind, like let's say the Note 9, they're not getting it as fast.
Oh, yeah.
So that kind of sucks because that makes you feel like, oh, well, now that they've got my money, they're, not really valuing me anymore as a consumer. It's one thing that we always say about Apple. Most people can agree the support from the Apple software side is excellent. And it's part of the reason why people ride with Apple generation after generation of device. So it's good to see them doing this. I want to see them do this across multiple models. I want to see them doing it with all their phones, even if it is one generation back, I think that appreciation of their customers goes a long way. You see what Pixel users are appreciating. That's why they buy them, and OnePlus users too. So goodbye, Samsung. I would like to see them extend this to other devices, even if they are like one generation back.
Absolutely. I definitely 100% agree with that. I definitely appreciate the fact that they are trying to play catch up. I definitely appreciate the fact that they are trying to make this more available because they are updating older devices, just like how Apple does. But the only thing is that they probably go like, what, 2 years of software update, and then after that, security patches. So they're trying now, and I think with the 855 Snapdragon, they said that they'll add an extra year depending. I think the Note series probably will have a little better edge because that's more of a power phone. So we'll have to wait and see in the third year. I don't even know if I'm going to stick with it because 5G is rolling out, becoming more productive. But I really do enjoy my Note 10 Plus. But that's for another story. But I appreciate I do appreciate that Samsung is trying to do this, and I appreciate that they're adding support to more devices like the Tab, the mid-range phones, and on top of all that, the Android operating system that they're using, One UI 2.0, which is like your skin, is so much easier to use. I like the One UI 2.0, and I think they've mastered it with simplicity. It's not anywhere near iOS, but it's much easier to use than I would say probably something like stock Android. I mean, don't get me wrong, stock Android is just as simple, but Samsung, they hit it on the nail. I think so. So
yeah, a lot of good features. Samsung does really good with their UI.
They had dark mode first before Google. That was even shocking.
Yeah, they've had some really good features. What Google does though is Google makes it standard. Like they make it a standard. So if once Google integrates it into the Pixel skin or the the Pixel UI or whatever,
it's just stock Android. It's
right.
really nothing.
But once they put it in there, they're basically inviting others that are Android manufacturers. Hey, we're doing it. You guys should follow suit. It's supposed to be like trend setting.
Absolutely. Also, Sam, thank you for sharing out the stream. I just got the notification. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Buddy. Yeah, buddy.
Let's get that. All right. So now that we've talked about the One UI 2.0 and them rolling it out, now let's get to the main story. As I promised, RCS messaging. So RCS messaging, as you know, him and I, we have talked about this in the past. Now, before we do talk about RCS, let's give a little brief summary, roundup of where we stand and where we're at today. So it was last year, I believe. It was last year that Google announced, and Sam, you could butt in if I miss anything, and you could definitely add in some stuff if you know anything. It was last year that Google had announced a new standard for messaging called RCS. RCS stands for Rich Communication Services, and it basically was meant to be a replacement for SMS. Now, if anybody's used SMS, it is a piece of crap. Even with a Samsung skin making it look better, it's still garbage. RCS was supposed to be that rollout that would replace SMS. It would allow you to send better photos at high resolution. It would allow you to send up to 100 megabytes of video, etc. Basically, in a summary, it was iMessages for Android because it basically combined the use of Wi-Fi and cellular to give you a better communication with the user, and also gives you some feedback when typing, because with SMS you can never see when somebody's typing. And as Apple users would say, you see the green bubbles. So now all that sounds nice, but a year later, a couple months before, we hadn't heard anything. There had been some side projects announced by Samsung and Google that they had partnered up to bring RCS to their messaging app, but nothing had come. There was no talk, there was no awareness, there was nothing. And for a while, most people forgot about it. And I believe a week before the announcement came, you and I did a video together talking about RCS. You brought it up to me. You're like, you know about RCS. Sam was the one that introduced it to me, and I looked more into it, and it really stuck out. And that's why I wanted to cover it with you that day. And we did so. Fast forward a week after that video was posted. Now, I'm not saying we're the reason this happened, because there's no way in hell they saw that. Whoever saw it, the carriers. But the carriers came out and said, we're going to make an app that uses RCS messaging with the support of all of the carriers. And Google had no idea this was happening, because even Google, they didn't say anything. Although they did announce after they would be rolling out RCS, but they did say that, we appreciate the carriers wanting to do that, but we're going to do this right. So then after that, Google finally rolls out RCS. Now, at first, it was a little bumpy. Most carriers supported it, some didn't. Well, flash forward a couple weeks ago, Google has added a carriers update, and now RCS is universally usable. in the United States. Everywhere else in the country, I have not heard from, nor have I seen articles posted. But RCS is officially rolled out to the mass. So there's no more excuses, no more dead features. RCS is there. Now, this is where we get into tonight. Now we're going to talk about more about RCS. We're going to break it down. We're going to discuss using this article, which the link will be at the end of this video from Digital Trends. This is the most recent, so you're up to date. So we're going to start and we're going to break down everything. So, Sam, my question to you, what is your opinion on RCS and how do you feel knowing that RCS is continuing to roll out? Before we talk about other OEMs and everything, RCS on the Google Messages app.
So RCS, I mean, up to this point, it's kind of been a pipe dream. We haven't really seen it materialize. We've wanted it for a long time. I could tell you right now, I never went, the Apple way. So because of that, I've always felt like messaging has always been this broken platform for Android. After I transitioned from BlackBerry to Android, I really loved BBM. I don't know if you remember BlackBerry Messenger.
I remember that.
So it was really, really good. It was very reliable. It had a lot of the same features that we currently see deployed and utilized by iMessage. So I always wanted a BlackBerry Messenger that was designed for and by Android, but that never really came. The standard messaging app that comes stock with Androids is ugly. It's not very interactive. It's not very intuitive. I wouldn't say it's feature rich. And then when you're trying to send video files and audio files, the quality is poor, resolution is really low. There's so many things missing from the messaging platform on Android, and it never came. Like, there was this idea of RCS, and because Google never really took it seriously, or whatever their plan was, they just never really executed it. It kind of leaves consumers out there like, I need to find a solution that I enjoy. So that's why platforms like WhatsApp and platforms like even Twitter, bro, like people legit message DM as a form of standard text messaging through Twitter and Snapchat and other apps, which is completely and utterly unacceptable because those are apps that are primarily designed for a different use. They're not designed for text messaging, but people kind of use it that way because they're uninspired by whatever, apps they have. So I think it's been a long time coming. It's probably taken longer than it should have. It's also been troublesome in trying to get it rolled out. Carriers have kind of stood in the way, and then Google starts to push them, and then the carriers kind of sort of take it seriously, and then they stall again, and then Google says, "All right, fine, get out of the way. We're going to do it." This has been a problem since day one. These are problems that Apple doesn't have because Apple doesn't let carriers do anything to their UI or their operating system. Because Androids have always been open source in nature, carriers have always had the ability to control what's going to be preloaded on the phones. So if you buy a Samsung from Verizon, there's Verizon bloatware. Same thing with T-Mobile. Even the startup screen, you'll see the logo for the company. And then you see all the apps that they choose. Facebook is coming pre-installed, all these other app platforms. What if you don't want any of that? But you want to buy your phone from a carrier, you're stuck with it. And then your options in terms of how it functions, kind of at the mercy of the carrier. So it's about time that something is done about the messaging deficiencies. I can share with you, my experiences. I've held off waiting for this to kind of stabilize or materialize. And, there's encryption problems. Some people are saying that there's security breaches. I mean, what are you supposed to do? You have to just sit and wait. You're at the mercy of the developers. So up to this point, I've tried to just be patient because, what's your other options? What are you going to do?
Absolutely. I have used RCS messaging. I've used it on the Google app, and I can tell you, it doesn't feel different. I mean, it may not look at first, but when you communicate back and forth, it probably is different. But from a user standpoint, from myself, I haven't noticed really anything different except, you see them responding. And that's okay, but that's another reason why I haven't switched over from Samsung Messages. Because if I don't feel there's any change, why should I switch to a messaging app? And considering that Samsung had signed a deal with Google to bring RCS to their app. I wonder why they never followed through. They did bring it to the S9 and the Note 9, but on Verizon. So again, you're right. The carriers are part of the reason why probably nobody has heard of this as much. But now let's talk about, before we get back to the carriers and before we get to anything, let's break down what RCS was supposed to do when it was initially rolled out. So RCS basically was supposed to replace SMS. SMS, again, has been used since 1982 for mobile communications, a second-generation cell standard by the European Telecommunication Standards Institute. And pretty much that's been the standard for many years, really. So to hear that, to hear that they want to replace this version with something better sounded cool. It sounded nice. And I guess you could say it just sounds, because that's the key word, is sounds. But will it do the thing is the question. But when you rolled out RCS, and here it is, here's the article, here's the piece right here. RCS is the protocol that will replace SMS, but it's got off to a very slow start. So it's exactly what we've said. It's a very slow start indeed. It was formed by a group of industry promoters in 2007 and brought under the wings of the GSM Association, a trade group, in 2008. But carrier participation and other factors kept it from gaining much traction for nearly a decade. I didn't even know that.
Yeah, it's been a problem. It's been going on for years.
Sorry,
I can
guys.
tell
I'm
you.
gonna let Sam. I'm gonna let
Go
you
ahead.
take over for a second. I just have to grab something real fast. I am
Go
so
ahead.
sorry, guys.
That's all right. Go ahead. I could share with you guys, like, at this time, in transitioning away from Blackberries to Androids, and we saw that the BlackBerry platform was a little bit slow to adopt any type of new features. We saw their market share kind of taking a backseat to Android and Apple. There had to be something to replace BlackBerry Messenger because people were starting to adopt Androids.
Sorry about
And
that.
there wasn't any type of standard. And whatever messaging apps were provided on the phones were lackluster. You weren't getting, the live typing feedback and response. You didn't know if they read your message. You weren't able to send any type of sizable file and retain any type of quality. Right away from the very beginning of using Android, you knew that that was the problem. Like, everything else about Android was really good. Power users, those that wanted custom, interaction with their handhelds, they loved Android. But nobody could argue it's been the problem since day one. And it's something that iMessage does really well. It's something that BlackBerry Messenger did really well. It's something that WhatsApp does very well. It's something that the other, even like Twitter, like, you look at the DMs, like, you get all of your instant feedback, when they read it and they received it, and you see when they're typing. Like, we've wanted that for years, and so many obstacles. And still, like, even to this day, like, you're looking at these last few months, Michael, there really hasn't been a global launch where it's like, hey, RCS is available, you can get access to it. Here is the protocol. Here's how you do this. Here's an update. That hasn't even come.
I
Like,
don't
most
even
people don't even
understand.
know.
Like, even to this day, like,
Yeah, I'm just making sure this works here. But yeah, I know what you mean. There has been no awareness. Not much people have talked about it.
Like, Michael, if I have this phone, this is a Google phone,
Mhm.
and I know it's RCS compatible, right?
Mhm.
What do I do to start using the RCS services?
Great question. What do? You got to download the Google Messages app. That's all you got to do.
So the app is in there. It comes pre-installed.
Comes pre-installed. Yes.
Yeah. So now, if I go to, like, settings,
Mhm.
I don't see anything that says activate or
Chat.
turn on RCS.
You got to go to chat features or chats, whatever is in there, and then it will have the switch on.
I don't know.
Let me
don't
see
see
it.
any of that.
I want to see on your end. I'm sorry, guys. Let's just see this on your end because I want people to get a visual idea. So show your phone up on the screen if you feel comfortable to do so. Only the settings only. If you're comfortable with that. If not, that's completely fine.
Sure.
So basically, the way that you're supposed to activate it is you go there. Okay, let me zoom in real fast. Okay, my eyes are falling. You go to add. Let's see. I can't see too well, Sam. Do you see it? Chat features. That's it. I'm sorry. My eyes are going. I think I need glasses. Chat features. And from
Is it
there,
not focusing?
yeah, it's okay. Click on chat features. And in there, what's supposed to be is a switch that will toggle on the RCS. Now, it's not called RCS by default, but what it is
It
it's supposed to,
says connected, status connected.
that means
Chat
you're
features
on.
are ready to use. Okay.
That means it's
Because I
already active.
remember trying to do it, so I was like, okay, enable chat features, use Wi-Fi or data for messaging when available. That's good. We were never able to use Wi-Fi before.
Mm-hmm.
Send and read receipts, that's on there. Show typing indicators, that's on. Resend messages if undelivered. Now, the problem is if somebody on your other end that you're sending and receiving to, if they don't have RCS enabled, it doesn't work.
Absolutely. And that
So
goes
there's
back
no
to
auto enable. Like there really should be that.
what we're going to discuss. Like, why aren't they being adopted widely? And also, we have a question in the live stream from a man named Latch. Sam, do you know this guy?
Lachlan
Lachlan
Cashin.
Cashin.
Good to have you on, Lachlan.
Good to have you on indeed. And he asks, when RCS coming to the rest of the world? That is the $1 million question. That is the $1 million question. When exactly is it going to come? Hopefully, we'll have an answer by the end of this. But again, this is just opinion based, so don't take our word for it as the final word. So please do bear with us when we discuss, but we will definitely answer your question at the end. But yeah, so RCS is in the Messages app, and the article here continues by saying the chat is a protocol, not an app. Basically, this RCS is supposed to be a universal profile. It's not supposed to be a feature. It's supposed to just be already on default. And right now, there are only 2 apps that support it. And I don't even understand how they say the second app supports it, because I use the second app, Android Messages and Samsung Messages. Okay, time out. Let's discuss Samsung Messages for a second. I have used the Note 10 Plus for a solid 3 months.
I've got the S10 Plus.
I have the Note 10. You got the S10. My mother has the S8. I know a couple of family members that have the S9 Plus. Of all those phones, not one of them has RCS. And there's a reason why.
Really?
There's a reason why. Because they never use the RCS feature. Samsung claims that they've made a deal with Google to bring RCS to their version. Because behind, the Google Pixel lineup, the Samsung Galaxy phones are somewhat considered to be the best Android phone in the market. Some people say that, some people don't. It's a back and way two street. But they made a deal to bring RCS to the Samsung Messages app, and unfortunately, it didn't happen. It did happen, however, a couple of months later when Verizon got access to it when Samsung released it for the S9, S9 Plus, and even the Note 9. Here's the problem. None of my family member has Verizon. They either have AT&T or T-Mobile. So saying that Samsung Messages has RCS is complete blasphemy. It's blasphemous, in the words of Stephen A. Smith. It's blasphemous because nobody could use it, and it's not even a good feature. That it should be all over the board, which goes back to, again, carrier involvement. Now, obviously, with the push of RCS, a lot of Samsung users have spoken up in the wake of this messaging Samsung. And I have checked, we can check them out later, leaving trends to basically announce that they want to get RCS on the Galaxy phones. And what is Samsung's response? Stay tuned. So that's not saying much. That's like saying the shit that I took last night was better than the shit I took this morning. So I don't understand what exactly they're saying. If it's maybe they'll bring it, maybe they won't. But stay tuned is not a good response. So I'm going to ignore Samsung Messages, and I'm going to say right now, Android Message is the only platform you can use RCS. Now, while it does seem a little bit restrictive, the article claims, most manufacturers ship with Android's default messaging app, with the exception of course, Samsung. So now the question is, OEMs adopting this universal profile. Samsung, they claim, is adopting this platform. But again, it goes back to what we said. We don't see it being used. And I don't understand, why these companies wouldn't want to use it in their own. Look at OnePlus, Oxygen OS. Very nice, very smooth. I think that's personally better than stock Android. It's just as fast. That's probably the closest. I don't understand how this cannot be used across the platform. And we have some comments. I'll get to your response in a second. Let's see what Latch says. It feels like there are a lot of things that need to happen for RCS to become mainstream. Google has to work with different countries' carriers. Is Google even confident? Very good question. Very good question. Ronald, thank you for coming on tonight. Samsung uses the universal profile. Google is using Jiva? Or does he mean Java? Ronald, just make sure I said that right. Ronald goes on, carriers didn't want to support the universal profile. I don't understand how they wouldn't want to support the universal profile. Oh, yeah. Samsung takes forever to update. I have the S10 Plus and don't have Android 10 yet. Actually, we talked about that earlier, Legend, so you can rewatch the stream when it's over. We talked about Android 10 rolling out faster than anticipated. You can check that out after. But yeah, so hearing that the carriers didn't want to support the universal profile, what do you make of that?
The thing about the universal profile, well, what you really need is you need standards that can be accepted across all Android manufacturers. You can't give them options. You can't tell them, look, you can use this, take it or leave it. There has to be an agreed upon standard. We see this problem with hardware with USB-C and power delivery versus, quick charge or whatever else. It's the same as with anything. If there's no agreement, if there's no standard, you'll never get manufacturers and developers on the same page. It's always going to be disconnected. It's always going to be disjointed. There's always going to be this issues. And that's why Apple doesn't have that problem. They don't have to overcome those bumps in development. If Android could say, look, you're going to use the Google Play Store, you're going to use the operating system, this is coming baked in. You don't have an option and say in the messaging app that comes preloaded and it's going to be the default messenger on the devices. If you want to use our OS, if you want to use our platform, you want to use the Google Play Store, this is what it's going to be. I'm not trying to prevent anybody from wanting to do something different, but by default, those apps need to be pre-installed and also set as the standard for messaging. If somebody chooses to disactivate the universal profile or not use it, that's their business, but it needs to be the first initial thing that's operating and running for the standard. That's always been the issue from the very beginning is, carriers, as well as the manufacturers, they've gone out of their way to avoid the mainstreaming, to choose to make themselves different and run things separately. And it's really a pain, actually.
Oh, 100%. 100%.
So, and there's no ownership. They don't have to, Android and Google, they've never said to them, you can't get away from this universal profile. You can't get away from this, the standard.
Agreed.
They've allowed them to do that.
And that's a sad thing because this universal profile would be the key game changer to everything. It would allow users from all over different Android to use in any of their platform, like you said, with their default app. Like Samsung has Samsung Messages. That's their default messaging app. It's
Right.
supposed to have RCS, but of course we haven't seen that. I think, though, Google's well, actually, let's take a look at the group chat before we keep going. Why did I say group chat? I meant to say live stream. Ronald says this is why Google is doing RCS through their app. I guess there's some point that you brought up earlier. He says, knowing Apple, they probably won't add RCS. Actually, not too sure about that. There was rumors that Apple is supposedly working on a deal to use RCS in the future, but nothing has come followed up since then. So I'm going to presume they're probably not going to add RCS for a long time, at least not without the universal profile anyway. Ronald says,
not hard. It's not hard to make your devices RCS compatible. It's not challenging. It really isn't. Especially when you're looking at, well, what if we were to just start today, 2020? Every device manufactured is going to use a universal profile and RCS chat, and we're just going to have a standardized app across all Android.
I see. And this is what Ronald writes. Universal profile is the best standard of RCS. It can work. I probably read that wrong. It can work in between any Android phones. Carriers didn't want to support it, so Google went and did it their own way. Okay. Samsung Messengers will support Google's way of RCS. It's already in South Africa. RCS between Samsung Messenger and Google Messenger. So, okay, it is a step in the right direction, but still, not many people use RCS again. It goes back to because of this adoption. It should be rolled out. Now, Latchet says 5G has RCS as its standard messaging. Sam, do you know anything about that?
I think that's true. I mean, and actually, if you scroll down to the next statement, this ties back into it. T-Mobile is enabling RCS for their newer devices.
I've heard about that, yes.
So what does that do for the flagships from last year?
It doesn't do anything. It makes them pretty much
So
useless.
for anybody who hangs on to their device for 2 or 3 years, they're not on standard for messaging.
And speaking of holding onto your devices, you made a very good video today, which I encourage you guys to go check out. He discusses $1,000 flagships. Why is it a thing? 3G as well. Very, very good video. I definitely suggest you guys go check that out. But yeah, it all goes back to, like you said in your video, they don't treat you well with the money you're spending. You spend money $1,000 one year, the next year, the next flagship gets over that. That doesn't seem fair. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm obviously talking about features, but like software support with RCS. If let's say this new flagship has RCS, but the last year flagship doesn't, that's not fair. Should be in the software update.
Right. Yes.
But of course, we know these companies, they will never, never get up to par. And I think it's a shame because this feature.
The shame, Michael, is the fact that Google phones suck.
Unfortunately, that's a fact. That's a fact.
You know, nobody's impressed by the Google phone hardware to entice them to buy one, because then they'd be on the RCS standard, and you know, like it would basically be the iPhone for Android. But the design is not attractive, the hardware is uninspiring, the battery life is not good. Like there's no reason to upgrade to a new Google phone. They haven't done anything to warrant the asking price, or you know, to switch from a Samsung or even an LG for that matter. I think LG makes better devices than Google does.
I'd definitely take you up on that one. And speaking of carrier chats, who supports chat, here is actually a piece of the article. Let's take a look at this. It says it was difficult to gain widespread support for RCS protocol. While some carriers like Sprint and T-Mobile were on board fairly early, many manufacturers hesitated. Since RCS required both a software and network update, many manufacturers didn't want to develop software to make their device retroactively support the protocol. Currently, there are 60 supporters, carriers, OEM manufacturers, and mobile OS providers that support the chat. So let's take a look at who these carriers support. It says here, Google now services chat for customer via its app, eliminating the need for carrier support, and Microsoft has also committed its support to the protocol. In the US, all the major carriers have signaled their support for chat, which means it should be fairly easy for mobile virtual network operators to get on board once they implement the standards. It says here, this fall, the 4 major US carriers, Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, and Sprint, formed the Cross-Carrier Messaging Initiative, a joint venture, again, talking about what we've talked about before. They're going to concentrate on standardizing RCS. But here's my thing, and now let's get into that carrier thing we were talking about earlier. I know I'm going all over the place, so let's try to keep it focused. So when we did the video where the carriers came out and said, we're going to create an app where all 4 of us support the protocol.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't know if this was because they felt fed up with something that Google was doing, or maybe it was just because they were tired of just waiting and wanting to roll this thing out. But as soon as Google heard that, they were like, nah, now we're going to do it our way. So my question to you is, do you think the carriers are going to support this by using Google's method, or do you think they're going to still follow through with this app? Because we don't even know much about the app. We only know that all 4 carriers are going to be involved in this to use RCS, and it will be cross-compatible. So let me hear your thoughts.
So that's in and of itself, that's the problem. You need to eliminate any input from the carriers. It's been up to the carriers up to this point, and you see where that's gotten us. They're not motivated. They're not inspired to do anything with RCS. Mm-hmm. They only do stuff when they're forced to do it. So what Google did was Google basically encouraged carriers to deploy this or to develop an app to use it. And that's been a complete failure. What they should have done from the very beginning was Google should have took this on as their own project. They should have been the ones responsible for the development and then also the rollout.
Look at Apple.
Leaving it to carriers has been a complete failure. Yeah, Apple.
Look at Apple.
Apple doesn't give carriers options. Here's the device. These apps are coming pre-installed from us. You can't pre-install anything, and you can't deviate from our protocol. Simple as
Yeah,
that.
and look at this. Look at the bottom of the article. Look at what the carriers are doing. Sprint. While Sprint has already rolled out RCS Universal Profile, you'll need a, quote, supported device to take advantage of it. And you'll need to be talking to someone who has a supported device. That's one. Next, T-Mobile. T-Mobile has begun rolling out RCS Universal Profile to some, keyword some, smartphones and plans to bring the feature to more by the end of the year. Well, we're almost at the end of the year. We're literally 7 days away from the end of the year. So I haven't seen any support come yet. So good luck with that. AT&T has agreed to the RCS standards, but there's still no word on a rollout. Goes back to what we said. Verizon.
They talk a good game. The carriers talk a good game, Michael.
They can't back it up, though.
No.
They talk a big game. Now back it up. Verizon. Verizon is rolling out RCS-supported phones. Okay. And Google Fi. Now, if you don't know what Google Fi is, it is Google's own service version, I believe. I think they ship it with Google Pixel phones. You could buy it through Google Fi. Google Fi supports RCS on all 5 phones. So basically, that's like Google's own service. But again, Google shouldn't have to be a carrier to do their own thing. And the carrier shouldn't have even been involved. That's why I feel so annoyed whenever I read articles about RCS, because like this is a project that could have been approached differently. Like you said, what they should have done was what Apple did. Listen, at the end of the day, it's not a shame to take pages out of Apple's book. Like, look, at the end of the day, everybody steals something from everybody. But stealing something that could be very beneficial for the consumer is not something that I would consider stealing ideas. It's more of just
I wouldn't say that adopting a universal messaging app is stealing. I mean, I feel like that is so good. It does so many good things for the end user. How could you consider that stealing? It's not.
Exactly. What they should have done, and a claim is that Google Messages will work with RCS across the board. They want to roll this out to laptops. Basically how iMessages is. But the thing is again, the carriers are involved, and that's not a good thing. So what they should have done is what you said. They should have developed this thing from the start. They should have had this thing developed not as a carrier's project where carriers need to be involved. This should have been a feature that was in their messaging app or just in standard and rolled the thing out and then partner up with OEMs, which we haven't even discussed yet. OEMs partner with their messaging apps to bring that profile to across the board. And then if you want to get carriers involved, but still, you shouldn't have to get carriers involved when rolling out something like this that's supposed to be universal.
Yeah,
the key word is universal.
Right, and the carriers, they should be focusing on selling coverage, like selling a network. They should be concerned about selling devices to their customers, not what's happening in the messaging apps, not what's happening in a universal standard. It's not their business, and they shouldn't be implicated in it.
See, this is why I use unlocked phones from now on. I never buy phones through the carriers because then you get those carriers updates. I just get my stuff unlocked from this point forward because it's so. Even Apple iPhones, even if you buy them through the carrier, you don't get carrier updates. You just get iOS updates.
Right.
So either way, for Android, I always say go unlocked because you'll never get a carrier update. You'll just get your security updates from the company.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes they come faster than the carrier updates.
Sure, yeah.
But anyway, we're almost done. A couple more things to discuss, and then we'll give our final thoughts. Let's talk about OEMs adopting this platform. Now, again, there have been mentions of it about different companies. They don't specify exactly who the major OEMs are. But right now, the 2 named ones are Microsoft, which is a big name. I don't think that'll be any bigger than anything we could say after, and Samsung. So, question. What does that mean now? Okay, so you got 2. Obviously, Microsoft is the biggest platform where everybody uses Windows. Everybody uses Windows. Even if you don't use Windows, you've at least once in your life used Windows. Come on. And you've got Samsung, which is arguably the best phone with Android. Arguably. I say arguably with quotations. Now, what about the other OEMs like OnePlus, LG, am I missing? Like Huawei even, but we can't even get into foreign. We got to stick with what's in the United States. But again, what about those other OEMs that are making these phones? Because mostly the market is saturated. The only names you see are Apple, Samsung, and Google, and even OnePlus. And I mean, I'm probably missing a few. If you have any you'd like to name, you can name a few. But that's all you see in the market. So why aren't these rolled out and What do you think? Why aren't OEMs adopting this, and should they be adopting it? I think that's an easy question. But the question is, why?
I don't know. I guess you got to think about obstacles. What's kind of getting in their way? What's their motivation to adopt certain things? Sometimes some manufacturers have certain priorities that they have to give attention, and they put other things like on the back burner. Do you think it's a situation of that? There's just other things that are more important to them, so they lack that development or that attention.
I don't know. Personally, I really don't know because I feel like they have the resource to do so, but whether they want to is the question. Because look at Samsung. I keep going back to Samsung because that's what I use, and that's mostly what a lot of people use. Because
Yeah, it's a big manufacturer. That's true.
the Pixels will have it by default, so there's no point in worrying about the Pixels.
Right.
But
But they have
Samsung
such a small market share too.
But
There's
that's the
just so
thing.
few.
Well, the 3A is picking up the market share. The budget phone, surprisingly, is the one that's getting
Right.
them in. But
Yeah.
Samsung should be really on top of this. They're all about innovation. They're all about this and that. I heard from their press releases and I've seen it at their live streams. All about partnerships. You have a partnership with a company that is rolling out their version of RCS that you could bring to your messaging app. They're giving you the resource. It's up to you to want to put them in the phone. And considering I have an unlocked Note 10 Plus with no carrier support, it's unlocked. Why would you not want to roll out RCS to those devices at least that don't need carriers? You could literally just roll it out.
They don't feel compelled. They don't feel like it's a priority to them, I
And
think.
that is another thing. And I want to say for that later, but that's a problem. And I'll address that problem. But again, you're right. There is no reason, there's no push. Now let's talk about OnePlus. They're growing, they're getting bigger. And with that big increase in market share, they're going to be wanting to give that push. Because look at it this way: the OnePlus 7, OnePlus 7T, OnePlus 7 Pro, even the 6T are all some of the top tier Android flagships with the best bang for your dollar. Why won't they have RCS? Is it because A, they're not compelled, B, they are lazy, C, they don't care, or D, all of the above?
I don't know. I don't know. I feel like it's just not a priority to them, and they don't feel like it's in their it's to their best interest to try to push for a technology standard that is not really to their control. So they don't feel empowered. They don't feel like it's their duty or responsibility. And I think they can all agree it's really on Google. It's on Android. And that takes me to one more thing. I would really like to see Google abandon their hardware and focus on all things software, developer, applications, those types of things. And I think they should have OnePlus make their hardware.
That's a
And
very that's a
and
very
by
bold statement.
and by doing that, they can focus on things like RCS and messaging and developers and apps, and just like focus on the stuff that really matters to Android. Hardware doesn't really matter when it comes to, the user experience. Hardware is I mean, look at what we're seeing now. We're seeing like foldable devices that are supposed to serve as smartphones. And that's the most innovative thing we've seen in several years. If you go back to 2015, smartphone hardware has changed very, very little. If you go back to like the Google devices, the Nexus devices from like 14 and 15, like as a standard, like what has changed in the hardware? Displays have gotten a little bigger. The display aspect ratio has changed a little bit, but overall, hardware has been stagnant. So the focus should be and should have always been the development of apps, the user experience, things like messaging, the things that we're doing the most. That should be our focus. And we haven't really seen that from Android. We haven't really seen it from Google. We've seen some like Google Assistant innovations. We've seen some user experience upgrades, things that were kind of deserved and You know, it took a while for them to come out. We've wanted them, and they finally came to fruition. But we should be seeing more of that on an annual basis. Like every time somebody upgrades every 2 years, there should be a generational improvement in user experience. The focus in hardware is almost futile. Like the focus should be about the experience, actually. You know, so uh, I don't know what manufacturers are going to be keying in hardware, but again, like I said, Android should be leaving the hardware. If this is what they want to be open sourced and all that, they should be leaving hardware to the manufacturers, and then they should be really, really focusing on user experience, perfecting messaging. I mean, bro, we text everything. Hardly anybody calls for majority of their communications anymore. So, where has been this innovation in messaging? No attention at all to that, at all.
Mm-hmm.
So, like I said, Google get away from hardware, focus on the user experience, including software, features, and messaging, things like that.
I agree, and I was listening. I apologize, guys, for that. Just have to take care of something real fast. But yes, I agree. There should be a push. There should be a desire to want to use this because this profile, this feature like RCS, it could be so much more bigger than what it is right now. It could be so much better, not just for Android users, but just everybody in general. And I feel that it's a shame that there is no motivation, there's no like drive to want to push this thing out. And it's sad that Google had to do this in an attempt because carriers announced we're going to do our own thing. Because I personally believe the only reason Google did this was because the carriers said we're going to do our own version. Hey, listen, you could argue that, but that's just what I believe. That was the thing that said, okay, enough is enough. But that's just me. Now, last thing I want to talk about, and I saved this for last because I did mention it before, and then we'll give our final thoughts, and then I will leave an instruction guide at the end of this video on how to turn on RCS if you use Android messages, because I do advise everybody to please take advantage of this feature, even if it is so minuscule. To turn it on, it only takes 2 seconds, and it'll be so much better than what you're using. But again, if one person does it, it obviously will make a big, big difference, but still, bringing awareness to this thing helps. And that's the last thing I want to talk about, awareness. Consumers aren't talking about this. Consumers don't know anything about this stuff because they're so accustomed to using what they use. It's like they've gotten away with brushing something under the mat. They brushed it under the mat, and all consumers are like, we'll just use it. But consumers complain about SMS. They complain. So if you're given an opportunity to change that, and it will be so much more beneficial in the long run, why wouldn't they want to speak up and say push that? Well, it's a simple answer. They don't know much about it. And that's my key takeaway with tonight. And my problem is consumers. Consumers is not the problem. It's their knowledge of this stuff that's the problem because they don't know about it. If more people would brought awareness to this, and I blame the OEMs, I blame everybody, even people on YouTube for not bringing this thing up. Very few people talk about it. So the more awareness this thing gets, the more a demand would start to build, the more feedback people start to give. And the more push and shove is the better, because once people find out what this thing can do, you will start to see people say, oh, now I want this, now I want this. So I would hope that by tonight's video, you understand, to anybody that didn't even know anything about RCS, this would drive you to complain, which is what Samsung users are doing. As a matter of fact, let's pull it up. I'm going to show you this. I'm going to show you their RCS. Here is what I'm talking about. So this was their first start. This was done last year from Verizon. Here's the community tab, Samsung Messages and RCS. This was after they announced Google. See, look, this user complained, wrote a full letter saying Google has made the decision to bypass the carriers to finally bring texting up to par on Android with RCS. I think it was a great move versus waiting on the carriers to do something. The only issue is when it comes to Samsung Messages, they have to wait on the carriers to release RCS. And he basically goes on and on. You can read this for yourself. You can pause the video if you want to take a look at it. He is basically saying Samsung should really make the right decision by rolling with Google and release RCS. Flip the switch. Here was the reply that I was talking about. Stay tuned. Moron. Then it goes in, then he responds, he goes, 4? LOL. Is that a good thing? I'm assuming. I agree. Somebody else says, dump the Samsung messages. It's a waste of time, and I'd rather have Android Messenger. So, as you can see, there are some people that know about this, and some people are speaking up. There are more in the column. If I go here, I have to see here. Samsung messages on the webs, and then a couple of other things. But these were the most recent content that I looked at that involved RCS. So the whole takeaway that I'm hoping people do is speak up. The more they hear your voice, your input, the more they're going to do something. And it sounds stupid because you'll go, oh, but they're a manufacturer, they're a company, they won't listen to you. Trust me. The one thing that companies all use, no matter how big or small, is feedback from consumers. If you don't believe me, I spent 2 years in business courses. I've got another 2 years to go. Every single company that uses and sells, they listen, even if they're $1 trillion. Look at Apple. I hate to say that, but listen, Apple listens when it comes to software. They get that because that's their one thing that they do. They listen to the software. They listen to everything that the consumers want. Yeah, they may not deliver, but they listen. They even have a feedback thing that you can leave feedback on if there's bugs, if there's anything you want to report. And they're doing it with iOS 14 again. As buggy a mess as it is, they are now featuring more things to hear more feedback. So the goal that I'm trying to say is this. Open up, speak up, let your voice be heard. Don't sit in the back and be like, oh, yeah, let them deal with it. You're part of this fight or whatever, if you want to call it a fight. You're part of this problem, and you could be a solution if you speak up and say the things that you're not afraid to say. That's the whole takeaway. Say something, that don't be afraid to say it. Because literally, this guy did it. What did they say? Stay tuned. So don't be afraid to speak up. That is my takeaway from that, and I want to hear what you have to say to consumers and etc.
If you want something to change, if you want something to improve, you've got to be proactive. And in the case of being a consumer, you know, if they give you the platform like a message board or a review form or some type of feedback message, it's kind of your duty to reply, and it's your duty to go out of your way to make sure that you express either your displeasure or your disapproval of some kind of a feature or some kind of maybe it's a missing feature or something like that. They'll never know what you want if you never say anything. And they'll never know something needs attention because they developed it that way. To them, it seems fine. But the end user, the customer, whoever is going to be using it, they're the ones that they're serving. So in actuality, I didn't realize this till later in life. Criticism, and it doesn't matter, negative or positive, creates reflection and allows you to investigate and look into making things better. Because what happens is if you probably don't see what's going on. So you ask people, you know, hey, what can I do to make this better? Or what could be improved? Is there something I could tweak or adjust? That's how things improve. I've had a YouTube channel for a couple of years. I've been teaching for 10 years. And initially, when I first started teaching, I wanted to hear from people, you know, that I was a good teacher. And with that came criticism. If I didn't get that criticism, I would be doing the same things that I was then without ever showing any growth or improvement. These companies want to win. They want to succeed. That is a measure of how much money they make. It's a measure of how many customers they have. So when customers give them feedback and they respond, the customers are likely to be retained and stay. So you help yourself, you help the company, and you help other customers when you voice displeasure or approval or recommendations or critiques. As the saying goes, closed mouths don't get fed. So if you don't,
Perfectly said.
and your voice is, it's how you vote. You know, you think about it, right? Like how you spend your money, you know, communicating, you know, to make things better with improvements. If people don't say anything, they're basically saying we're good with it, whatever it is.
Exactly. And listen, I could literally switch to Google Messages right now if I wanted. I could literally just switch and I wouldn't care. But the thing is, I'm already invested in Samsung's interface with the Galaxy Watch, and it uses their messaging app. You can't put Google Messages on there, which is sad because that would have been better. But I could go out and buy a Google Watch. But again, I believe personally their Watch OS is better. Even though it uses Tyson, I still think it's a better watch. But the point I'm trying to make is that I could do that, but I choose to stay with Samsung because I like what they're doing, and I've spoken up. I haven't been afraid. I've messaged them many times. A couple times they hit my feedback because it was posted publicly by accident. I meant to send it privately, but I spoke up, and people are speaking up. So I believe in feedback, and that is how everybody grows, not just individually, not just personally, but as a whole. That's how everything goes. If you don't get negativity, you're doing something wrong. If it's too much positive, in my opinion anyway, I think if you don't get any negativity, you're doing something wrong. Because if you could keep doing something so perfect and no one ever had the ball to say, oh, this isn't cool or anything, you're just being like baby fed. It's just being like a baby.
You don't have the right collection of enough of the right types of people, right, to give you that feedback from all angles.
Exactly. And that's why, hell, I don't care if people call me an asshole on YouTube, but listen, I'd rather them say that than say you're the best YouTuber on the world. That's just me. Look, even if I respond, I'm not going to bash you. I take your feedback. That's what I always say. Like you. But anyway, this ain't about me. This ain't about you. This ain't about our YouTube channels. It's about RCS. So let's wrap this up. To everybody that's watching this live for an hour, thank you so much for tuning in. But final thoughts, and I'm going to leave this up at the end. I'm actually going to do it now. Let me pull you up, Sam. This is the how-to if you have Google Messages, if you want to enable it right away. We're going to leave that up. This instructs, it's a tutorial. It shows you how to do it, just for anybody that wants to. So final thoughts. I'm going to go first, and I'm going to let you go. I think RCS has potential to be so much bigger than what it's being right now on the Google Messages app. I personally believe it can be so much better and very beneficial for everybody. The problem is there's no push, there's no drive, no motivation from anybody, carriers, consumers, etc. And I feel that's a big problem because the carriers shouldn't have to be involved. This should have been a Google feature from the start. This should have been something Google wants to do, not what carriers want to do. But we can't change history. We have to deal with what we have to do with. I don't say switch to Apple because iMessage. I mean, iMessage is great, but I'm not going to say just go because their carriers listen. They've got RCS. They've got it on their platform, but I think it's not enough to give it a global wide spread out. So I encourage people, and I always say this to the end of the earth, speak up and be heard. So my final thoughts, if you want RCS, if you want that rich communication service, if you want to send better quality video, if you want to send better quality text messages, better quality pictures, have some fun with stickers and emojis, if you want to send anything close to what iMessages is doing for Android users, I urge you to speak up and give feedback of using RCS on their platform, or just download the Google Messages app if you don't want to speak up and just want to use it. I encourage you to try out RCS for yourself and make sure everybody knows about this. I hope that we were able to spread this to people. I was hoping that by the end of this video, you guys will know more about it by the end of this. So please speak up, be heard. Let it be known that you want this feature in all smartphones. Doesn't matter the manufacturer. And mostly just use it. If you can't even get it from them, just use it. So that's my thoughts. That's my final say. Go ahead, Sam.
I mean, that's pretty well said. It's now that they've created the standard and it's available to users, it's on you. Now, it's important to be informed and to exercise whatever technologies and whatever standards are available to you. You take advantage of it. So they provided it. Go ahead and download what you need to do there. Adopt the technology, adopt the standard, and we can all get on the same page. Because like I said, I don't want an Apple device. I don't want iOS, but there are certain features that I like about iOS and what Apple does that I would like to see Android inherit. And we're starting to see some of that happening now, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, I agree. Because, I mean, look, I'm not saying iOS is terrible, but considering I've been using Android, honestly, I prefer it. And with Android 10 coming out with so much better gestures, navigation, it's only going to get better.
Sure.
So, yeah, that's it for tonight's episode. I want to say thank you to all commenting in the live stream. I really appreciate your feedback, and I appreciate your words of wisdom and knowledge. As always, I appreciate it. I just left a little message in there. One last thing. Ron says, check the Discord after the stream. I will definitely check it out. And, again, we didn't get to acknowledge it, but Caesar, hey, man, how you doing? Thank you for joining tonight. So, guys, that is it for tonight's live stream. Again, thank you, Sam, for coming on.
Thank you for having me, buddy.
We got a couple things to finish. We've got our UFC podcast to finish with the predictions before 2020. We'll do that another time. But guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys learned a little bit from tonight. If you understand now what RCS is, and again, I will continue to cover this, and I will continue to bring awareness to this in all my videos if there's any news, anything that comes alive. So that's it for tonight's live stream. Thank you guys, and from the Technoid Nation to the SMT Nation, peace.